Final day of the season, and it is definitely emotional. It always is after a campaign. But yesterday, we might have seen the last of the World Series championship Cubs. And what a way to go out for Kyle Hendricks. We'll talk about that, a little bit about today's game and the future of the Cubs right here on the Cubs Baseball channel. Let's get this thing going, guys. And again, like, subscribe, comment. Let's go. What do you say, everybody? Mick Gillespie, thanks for hanging out with us on the Cubs Baseball channel. One game left in this season, and I would call it a disappointing season just because of the expectations. Anytime you don't make the playoffs, it's disappointing, and that's the bottom line. But you know what? This team has definitely established the fact that there's fighters on this roster. I respect the way that this team is not backing up to the finish line, but they're running to the finish line. And for the Cubs, another shutout win over the Cincinnati Reds. And after struggling all season long against divisional opponents, they have a chance for a sweep at the end of the season if they get. We'll be with you, though, during the offseason, as always, running down the stories, talking about the Cubs every day. And you can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok, Cubs Baseball channel. All right, let's talk about the professor, Kyle Hendricks. I've known Kyle Hendricks since the Cubs traded for him, and he came over from Texas. And what a brilliant career he's had for the Cubs in the major leagues. He was always a guy who not everyone believed in, and it's because he's not overpowering. He's not a player that you look at and say, hey, you know what? He's going to throw 100 miles an hour and swing it by you. He's got to do it with deception. He's got to change speeds. But I'll tell you what, when he was on, he was as solid of a pitcher as the Cubs have had. And you look at the rotation 2016, he was fighting for a chance to make the roster. I mean, you had John Lester and John Lackey and Jake Arrieta. I mean, think about how good that rotation was. And then all of a sudden, when you got to the end of the season, he was the guy who was always in the spots, the big spots. He pitched the game that got the Cubs to the World Series for the first time in 45 years. And then he was the starter in Game 7 of the World Series. And I always thought Joe Madden pulled him out early. And I love Joe. I think Joe would be an asset to the Cubs organization if they could figure out a way to get him on their TV network. I think they need a lot of help in that area. He could bring that. He's a great person and a personality and a character and all that stuff. So, but I've long criticized the way that last game was managed. I just want to let him go, and instead of turning it into the game that it turned into. But at the end of the day, Kyle Hendricks was always prepared, and this season was a struggle. I mean, let's talk about it. It was a struggle. At some points this year, we didn't know if he was even going to be on the roster, and it really felt like the way that he performed and all the trouble that he had, that he wasn't going to make it to the end of the season. But I'll tell you what, his character shined through in the face of, being overmatched at times this year. His personality, the way that he conducted himself, never pointed the finger, never had a bad attitude. You see him in the post game. He was always positive, talking about what he could do to help the team. They put him in the bullpen. Injuries pushed him back in the rotation. And honestly, it was just so fantastic to watch him pitch brilliantly in his last ever Cubs start. And I think that's it. Honestly, I think this is going to be it for him. I think that the Cubs are going to move on. He's going to go pitch somewhere else if he can get a job. He's going to have to make it through spring training, but I just don't see it with the Cubs. The standing ovation that he got was fantastic, but Cubs fans, we've always been the best fans, and we appreciate him so much. And it's hard for me to believe that we waited our entire lives to get that World Series. And it felt like it was setting up to be not just one, but it was going to be a run We had all of the young players in the core, and they even got there a year early. Nobody thought it was going to be 2016. Everybody thought it was going to be 2017 and 2018, and that the Cubs were going to be that franchise that was, in the mix, winning World Series, kind of like the Astros have been, to be honest with you. I thought the Cubs would be right there, and it just didn't work out that way because for whatever reason, I feel like part of it is when you win the World Series as the Cubs and you break the biggest streak in sports history, and a one that we didn't know was going to happen. I mean, remember the shirts, just one before I die? You should never have to buy a beer. You should never have to buy a meal in the Windy City after that. But as the time's gone, I mean, one after the others left, and it's him, and he's the last one. And I think that when things are all said and done, that this is going to be it. This is going to be the guy that we say, hey, you know what? Thank you. Thank you to all of those guys. And I think one day we'll have some kind of a statue out front of the last out of the World Series. We'll celebrate those guys when they're out of baseball. It does make you feel a little bit old to think, going into the 2025 season and, that there's nobody left from 2016. But I wore this today for him and for this, for this franchise that we all love. Now, Cubs are going to finish up things today, 2:20 against the Cincinnati Reds. And I'm looking forward to this. When you look at the matchup, Caleb Killian, who we thought at the beginning of the season had looked so good in spring training. He was one of the pieces that the Cubs got back from the Giants in the Chris Bryant deal. And we thought, hey, this guy's going to be ready to go. And then he was great. And then he got hurt. And then it took all year. We saw him pitch, and now he's going to get a start the last day of the season. The numbers, that's just one start. He pitched. I thought he did some things right in that game, and then other things he didn't do great. But he's going up against one of my favorite players that's not in a Cubs uniform, in Hunter Green. Love Hunter Green. Love the old school Nolan Ryan type guys. He's just going to rear back. He throws that really heavy, high four-seam fastball. He's had a great season. This is a prospect that's been on the radar, as you guys know, for a long time, and just loving the game of baseball. He's a guy I just love watching play. Like, yeah, not a Cub, but still one of the guys that makes you fall in love with the game. Watching him pitch and what he does, I think he's a really fun player. 9-5 with a 2.83 ERA. Cubs are finishing, though. You know what? They're finishing with a fury, and the Cubs are 5 games over. If they lose the game today, they're going to have the exact same record that they had last year. Think about that. Everything that happened, they'll still be exactly where they are. And it has David Ross been vindicated. He kind of was, he laid on the sword last year for this franchise. I mean, he was the guy that lost his job, and we had a pretty big debate on here. I felt like Rossi could have done a better job of getting the young players ready, comfortable to play in the big leagues. But you know what? Some of that may be just on the way that the players are being developed. And I'm not putting an indictment on the Cubs. I mean, just in general, we throw these guys straight from college into the upper levels, get them to AAA probably before they should be there. And they're getting to the big leagues and they're not prepared. And then, him trying to win a pennant last year, or at least try to get into the playoffs last year, didn't do a great job of integrating those guys. I thought that Counsell was much better at that. But at the end of the day, we're still in the exact same spot unless the Cubs win. So the Cubs could end up 6 games over, or they could end up 4 games over. So it's right in the same neighborhood, not making the playoffs. The best or the second best team not making the playoffs still stinks. All right. Thank you guys for hanging out. Give me in the comment section, tell me what your favorite Kyle Hendricks moment was. I remember talking to his dad and saying, hey, man, I just believe in this guy. I think he's going to be one day. At the time, he wasn't even in the rotation. I mean, you're going way back. I said, hey, I think he's going to start opening day. This is a guy who had the best earned run average in the National League over the course of a season. Everything he's done has been right. And he should be celebrated as one of the all-time great Cubs. I think one day he'll be in the Cubs Hall of Fame. I think he should be. Of all the pitchers that we've had, I mean, this is, came up with the Cubs, pitched a lot of games with the Cubs, and I'm sure he'll finish his career somewhere else. But anyway, I love the guy, and I think you guys do too. And what a run it's been. All right, like, subscribe, thumbs up, comment section. We will talk to you after the last game of the season, and hopefully, I'm pulling. Let's get that W flag up for the entire offseason. And by the way, Cubs fans, the fact that the team's out of it, but the ballpark's still packed. Hey, man, that's what makes Cubs fans the best fans. All right, we will talk to you again soon, and go Cubs.